Okay, let's get started. This is going to be a really great session. Let's start with a welcome to us all. Thank you for making the time today. I know we are all very busy, so it means even more that so many people have been able to come for this important topic. I'm Mandy Charman. I'm the manager of the Outcome Practice and Evidence Network that is located in the Centre for Excellence for Child and Family Welfare. Welcome. Firstly, let's acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we are each on today. For me, it's the Wurundjeri people in the lovely Macedon Ranges, elders past, present and emerging, and any Aboriginal people in the audience. Today we've got two presentations. We'll be having question and answers after each of them, and we possibly might have a little bit of a wrap-up time for any further reflections at the end. Please use the chat box to ask questions and communicate with other attendees, or contact myself or Dakina or the speakers if there's some issue. If you can put yourself on mute for now, and if you do want to have your video on or off, that's sort of up to you. While the speakers are on speaking, we will turn our videos off, but once the Q&A happens, it's always lovely for speakers to actually be able to see people that they're talking to. If you have any problems with tech problems with your online platforms, please contact Dakina Mitra privately through the chat function, or given you might have got kicked off, there's Dakina's phone number for you to text her. The session is being recorded, so we can share this with others who weren't able to be here. Okay, we'll be move along. So welcome to this open forum. I'm Mandy Charman, and as you're aware, Open has been established to support the sector to share, use and build evidence about what works to support the best outcomes for children and families. So we're privileged to work with all of you about various aspects of your evidence practice. Of course, one of our project activities are our events and activities. We have an open portal, an online resource for you to both find best practice programs in a whole range of topics related to the child and family service sector, and also technical resources to support you building and using your own evidence. We run an open advisory service to build your ability to deliver small research projects, engage in training, or support delivery of evidence-related projects. You can join our mailing list for free, and this helps us build and grow into the future. Okay, today's session is our fourth in a series on embedding evidence into practice. Building on these earlier forums today, we have a wonderful session planned which will explore in further detail the key steps two organisations have taken on their own outcomes journey, delving into both what worked and what didn't work, the sequence of the issues and how any challenges were overcome. They'll explore and reflect on their process to develop their service or intervention frameworks, build consistent outcome measurement approaches and data management platforms. The focus on our presentations, on these two presentations, are different, but you'll notice that many of the steps they have taken in their journey are similar. And this is what we've observed really strongly across our Embedding Evidence event program. And it is actually supported by the literature and research on the steps we need to take to embed evidence and outcomes focus into our organisations. Our experience shows that there are a range of domains that are needed to support organisations in their efforts to embed evidence into their practice. These are strong leadership and culture, which values, asks for and uses evidence to inform decisions, commitment and skills of staff in evidence practices, which I sort of loosely call designing and measuring for outcomes, and systems, policies and processes which make the day-to-day work of building and using evidence easier, more efficient and more useful to all involved. Now, it'd be really interesting if you listen out to see how our two presentations today have interacted and progressed these aspects across their work, because I can almost guarantee that they will have certain numbers of all of these aspects. We're going to be building a spotlight page on the portal where we can house all of the great insights that had come out of these open events and other case studies so you can share them in a one-stop shop type of place. All right, on to our session. We're going to start with, we have Windermere, who have been working in partnership with Practice Resource Research Centre, and Jessica Graham Franklin from the Social Ventures Australia. Okay, introducing Dr. Lynette Buoy, Marija Dragic from Windermere, and Warren Cann from the Parenting Research Centre with a paper about implementing a new practice framework and outcomes measurement approach. Dr. Lynette Buoy, very well known across the sector, commenced as the CEO with Windermere in early 2013. Previous to this, Lynette was the CEO for the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare, the General Manager for the Smith family in Western Australia, and also held the position of CEO for the Lake Gowrie Child Centre, Melbourne. Lynette's roles have seen her working across the community service sector in areas of community development, recreation, youth services, early childhood development, education and family services, all with a focus on improving outcomes for vulnerable and disadvantaged children, families and the community. Lynette has a PhD in organisational change, focused on employees' perceptions of change. Now I get it, Lynette, listening to that. Marija Dragic, had this before. Dragic is a social worker with over 30 years of experience in the community sector and academia. Her role as Manager Evidence, Innovation and Practice at Windermere Child and Family Services sees her implementing evidence-informed practice and a service system of learning across Windermere, driving an improved and seamless approach for consumers across many service offerings. Creating and embedding a culture for our people where evidence drives practice and closing the gap between what we know and what we do, ensuring outcomes are measurable and where partnerships and continuous learning enables us to do more and do it better for our community. And Warren Cann, CEO of the Parenting Research Centre. Warren is a psychologist and has held the position of Parenting Research Centre CEO since 2002. During this time, the Centre has been recognised nationally and internationally for the quality of our applied research and our capacity building strategies and programs. Warren has extensive experience in helping policymakers and organisational leaders bring scientific rigour to the practical task of improving the effectiveness of services and supports provided to children and families. Welcome you all. I'll hand over to you now.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Mandy. I'm going to start today on behalf of our small team. And before I get going on our journey, I just would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we all currently reside. I'm on Burrawong country, and also pay my respects to the first people on whose land we are, acknowledging the loss of lands, cultures and treasures, knowing the consequences for people, communities and nations, believing that we can work together to a better future. Now, I guess I've been told that I can only have a few minutes and to introduce this topic because it is one of my favourite subjects at work. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about our journey, and we've been on this journey for about 4 or 5 years, and it really started off with a desire for me to understand as the CEO, to have a position where I knew that what we were doing out in the community was making a difference. Now, it wasn't that I had no faith in the people that were working for Windermere, that we weren't doing great work. The challenge for me is that I'm not social work trained. So a lot of the speak that I was getting didn't make sense to me. And those that work with me know I love a little order, I love a diagram, and I love boxes. So what I was wanting to do was to actually be able to get a handle on what we were doing and to be able to be in a position to measure what we were doing and to measure it so that we could keep improving it and talk to it at Windermere in the same way. So I contacted Warren from the Parent Research Centre and invited him into our organisation and said, just come and talk to us about how we could do this. And that started this great conversation that just evolved very quickly. We had 6 sessions. By session 3 or 4, we were all up drawing things on the whiteboard and really engaged in a conversation about what could be the journey. So that actually worked in the early days too, because we had team leaders and managers in the room as we were doing that, really just engaging everybody in a vision that we could change or talk about what we were doing differently and create a framework and a process that we could all own and contribute to and to keep improving, all with the one single focus, and that was making sure that the difference, that we were making a positive difference in the lives of the people that we were working with. So along the way, we've had some investment into the work that we've been doing. We were fortunate to get a learning grant in the early days that was through the partnership of the department and the Centre for Excellence. So we were successful in that, and that really helped. We brought Marija on board early in this process. I think we'd already received the grant, and then Marija came on board, and that was a really deliberate direction that we took, because we knew that we needed somebody who would lead this and who could help build it, design it, and embed it within our system. So we needed somebody, first of all, to understand it, be able to hold it, and then continue to share it across the organisation. And Marija's done a fantastic job and has been with us over 4 years. So it's been a great journey that we've been on together. So it's one of the things that we also were really keen on was a whole systems approach. So we didn't want to get something off at the shelf. I'm not saying off the shelf things are bad, but we didn't want to do that. We wanted to create a system that improved the capability of our consumers, the people that we work with, so that we had a focus on that, but also the capability of our staff to be able to engage and do this work better for their professional development and growth as well. So we were very much looking for a systems approach that was about the service that we were offering, the improvement that our consumers would receive as a result of it, and the benefits that our employees would get through their professional development, through their being involved in something that would help them be better at their job than as well. So we were looking for that sort of double whammy from what we were doing. So for me, that was really important. And now we've reached this most amazing phase after 4 years, 5 years of working on this, where we do have our framework, that we do have our data, which is just absolutely amazing, and we're being able to use it in that whole systems approach. So that's what we're going to share with you today. We're going to share with you what makes up our framework, what are all the components that fit together, and how we're using our data to continually reshape and rebuild the system that we're operating in. So that's my 5 minutes. I'm going to hand over to Warren, who's going to take you through a series of slides, and then he's going to hand over to Marija, who's going to be very brave and do a live data demonstration, so that you can see a little more about what data we're collecting, how we're collecting it, and how we're using it. So thank you for your interest, and I'm sure that you'll be very excited by what we've got to show you, because we're very excited by it as well. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Lynette. Yes, the journey that we've really been on together in this partnership has been about getting to grips with what real evidence-based practice looks like in a family services organisation. And of course, this journey sits in a broader policy context, doesn't it, where there's a real commitment to making evidence-based practice work. At almost all levels of government now, we have that commitment. It's clearly a really important foundational piece of the roadmap to reform. But the vision of realising evidence-based practice has proved to be fairly difficult to implement in reality. I mean, even with the commitment, it's been a long road, and I think perhaps we all might agree that we're still not quite there yet. And we think that one of the things that's made the vision of evidence-based practice hard to fully realise is that for some time we've been a little bit narrowly focused on what evidence-based practice means. And I think for some time there's been a kind of dominant idea that evidence-based practice is a product. It's the result of a scientific process, that it involves picking something off the shelf that has sufficient evidence and then implementing that. And if you do that, then you are achieving evidence-based practice in your service. And of course, there are lots of wonderful examples where taking a program approach like that, adopting a manualised intervention and delivering it with fidelity really does make a difference. But there's also been challenges with that, right? So sometimes programs are difficult to implement in new contexts. They don't always transfer well over different social situations, contexts and cultures. And I think a lot of the challenges we're faced in being evidence-based in our work has really come out of this issue with trying to make packages developed in another context work in our context. So we think that part of the way forward is to take a more expansive understanding or view of what evidence-based practice is, to acknowledge that you can think of evidence-based practice not just in product terms, but also in process terms. And that we can take an evidence-based approach to the way we design and deliver services, and we can take an evidence-based approach to the way we work with our clients and consumers. So taking this process-orientated approach, I think creates all sorts of opportunities for using evidence in more effective ways and improving the effectiveness of our services. So we're going to take a process approach to evidence-based practice. It begins with kind of a commitment to a core underlying value or set of beliefs that evidence-based practice entails. And I think Aileen Gambrell has really captured it here when she pointed out that the driving value behind evidence-based practice is transparency. It's about honesty. It's about being clear about what we do and being committed to measuring the effects of what we do. And then when we commit to this, we're starting to work in an evidence-based way. Now, one of the things that I think has also been a bit of a barrier is that we've tended to turn to research-based tools when it comes to thinking about evidence-based practice in services. And it's worth pointing out that when a researcher is wanting to say something about an intervention, they're typically wanting to make a causal statement about that intervention. They want to say with some confidence that this intervention results in these outcomes. And to do that, they have to focus on internal validity. That is, they have to use methodologies that can help them be more confident that they're actually looking at a cause-effect relationship. And so that's why you end up running randomized controlled trials, because you're trying to control for competing explanations or other things that might actually be the causal factor, not the intervention. But as service providers, you're not primarily interested in generating the kind of knowledge which is generalizable or just even building a knowledge base. You're actually interested in improving the quality of your service delivery, and you're trying to increase the impact of your programs and services. And your focus is much more on external validity. That is, are the programs, interventions, approaches you're using, are they acceptable to your client group? Are they relevant? And do they work for your clients and for your community? So there are different questions really that are driving the practitioner versus the researcher. And what we've become excited about is the possibility of taking tools which you guys already are probably very familiar with, and were actually developed by organisations and even really developed within the corporate sector, focused on quality improvement, and bringing a quality improvement lens to the whole job of improving effectiveness of services and programs. And you might recognise this as, another version of a PDSA cycle: plan, do, study, plan, act, study, do. And what we're looking at here is a systematic way of improving quality in practice, using the tools that many organisations are familiar with and have, some of them, particularly bigger organisations, have to hand. Often applied in a more corporate organisational sense, but potentially really productively applied to the question of improving impact and improving services. And so what this looks like is a kind of ongoing process where we are designing programs, interventions for families, implementing them, monitoring and analysing what happens, the results of those, and then taking what we learn, integrating that with research evidence, and then driving further the design of interventions. And the advantage of this approach is that it doesn't necessarily begin with taking something new and implementing it. It can begin with what we are doing now, and it can drive iterative improvement. So data-driven iterative improvement as a way of improving effectiveness, not to answer scientific questions about effectiveness, but to address the really key question for organisations, which is, are we having the impact that we need to have with our clients? So Windermere has basically adopted this and ended up with a system that looks like this. They have a practice framework which is quite specifically sets out how they want to work with their consumers. They have a data collection system which is giving them immediate feedback about implementation and outcomes. They are using that data system to both strengthen and demonstrate impact, but they're also using the data system to drive team-based quality improvement processes. So their practice development processes are being driven by this learning system that's working through the organisation. And so they are both leveraging things that they've got a lot of experience with, like providing good supervision, learning circles, and they've now got the capacity to benchmark both internally and even in the future externally in terms of their impact. And they're also bringing in this very deliberate quality improvement thinking, which is driven by an understanding that is informed by data. So what we're going to do in this discussion is focus mainly on the data aspects of this. We were very conscious going into this that data is a massive challenge for organisations. There are so many things that become problematic when you're looking at using data systematically. And I won't go through this slide, but just to let you run your eyes over it, to get a sense of the kinds of things that we were very, as a partnership, very conscious of. I mean, not only are there significant challenges with, choosing measures which are valid and reliable, but then there are a whole raft of just practical and logistical issues to do with collecting data and using it. And one of the main problems is having to depend on third-party researcher types, if you like, to come in and interpret the data, report on it, and feedback into the system. You sort of build in a whole lot of delays and effort and work that gets in the way between having the data and then using it. And we were just also very, very conscious that so much data is collected and is never put in the hands of the people who could really make a difference with it. So practitioners never get to see it. Team leaders never get to work with it. Organisations never get to use the data to think about whether or not what they're doing is aligning with what they're trying to achieve, and so on. So our vision was to create a data system that overcomes some of those challenges, that is sort of practical to use and be a real driver of continuous practice improvement, putting data where it needs to be, driving development, driving impact, rather than just, providing information. So the steps that we took in working our way through this, well, there are a number of steps, and we don't have time to go into this in a lot of detail. So I just want to give you a rough idea of each of the steps, and then we're going to hand over to Marija, who's going to give you a bit of a sense of what what the data dashboard looks like and how it's used. But I do want to make the point that data makes sense in the context of doing this broader work. And it's about linking the program design with the information that we're collecting, and then with team-based continuous practice improvement processes. And that sort of missing one of these pieces can really reduce the impact and value of your data collection efforts. So we started work with Windermere on their family service programs area and spent a lot of time really nailing the theory of change. Particularly, we wanted to understand the mechanisms of change. How is it that we are going to achieve greater child safety and well-being? And what came out of that was a practice approach, which is very focused on building adult capacity. So working with families, working with carers, building their capacity to care for their kids. So you're articulating the practice, you're articulating what's important for your theory of change to be realised or be brought to life, and that is specified in quite some detail. This is just a flavour of the kind of model, which is essentially a coaching model that Windermere have developed. And this model of coaching underpins the work of practitioners now working with families, representing quite a significant shift from an emphasis on case management to an approach which is about building adult capability. Then we take our theory of change and our practice framework and we identify a set of data that we need to collect that could be useful in driving quality improvement. And this involves some really practical decisions that we need to make about feasibility, because you just can't collect information on everything. So you have to be disciplined in what you decide to collect. And then deciding to collect data is one thing, but then getting it and using it is another. So we put quite a lot of work into developing online data capture systems that would reduce friction, reduce effort, reduce time by both practitioners and by administrators in the program. And for that, we use PRC's online data information system called PRIZE. But you could use any kind of online surveying system to collect data in a way that doesn't require too much additional processing, like SurveyMonkey or any of those things. And then that data is then automatically taken and processed and presented and visualized in data dashboards developed with Power BI. And this is a bit of the magic sauce here. Power BI is a Microsoft product. It's a very powerful way of visualizing data, but its key, I guess, magic ingredient is that it can draw data from all sorts of data sources. And so what Power BI does is draw the data out of a database and presents it in data dashboards, which become immediate in real time to the team and the practitioners who are using that data. So Marija, this might be the time to go to you to show what that data dashboard looks and take us through to the end there.
Okay. Just give me a moment. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So I would like to take you through our live dashboard and parts of our live dashboard. There are parts obviously that I won't be able to demonstrate today, and that is any although all of our data is hidden and we have codes for certain things, I will only be showing you generalized data. So one of the very exciting things that we did at Windermere and the result of all the work that we did over probably over the last 5 years, really almost 5 years, is the development of a system where all of our staff who work in integrated family services at this stage can actually log on and have a look at their data every day and identify specifically their consumers that they're working with, and also compare them across the board to all the consumers across the IFS teams. So this is what our navigation page looks like. So it's very user friendly. Aesthetically, it looks good. It's not all numbers and graphs. And along the left-hand side is a navigation page, and I'll just show you just a few, demonstrate a few things. So the first one is our measure timeliness. And what this data set shows us is whether measures have actually been completed. So we have a number of pre-measures and post measures. So we use the PEAM as a pre and a post measure, and the Parenting Wellbeing Index also as a pre and a post measure, and ongoing measures. We use session surveys to measure how our consumers are feeling that they're going. So at a glance, we can actually have a look at whether surveys have been completed within the times that they need to be completed. So that's in terms of timeliness. The next one is in terms of survey completion. So the first one was whether surveys have been completed within the time that they should be completed, and the next one's whether they're completed at all. So adversity surveys, for example, we're sitting at 71%, and our individual surveys that we undertake with our consumers are sitting, well, at 10. It says 10%, but it's actually at 50% or almost 51%. So it also demonstrates where we need to make improvements, work with our teams, all of that. I'll just show you session attendance. What we wanted to really find out was whether our consumers are attending sessions, and if they're not attending sessions, why, whether it was cancelled because they needed to cancel, whether they didn't show up, or whether the session was cancelled because the worker needed to cancel. With COVID, we also added telepractice. So this actually shows us that the modes of session, 66.47% of sessions were via Zoom, Teams or telephone. And what you'll also notice is we have menus on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Now, if I won't press into this menu, but I will show you in a moment what that looks like. What this provides us is an opportunity to compare our data over time. So I could press that menu, and on the left-hand side, put in a date range, for example, say all of 2021, and then compare the data of 2021 with 2020, and have a look at what is the difference between 2020 and 2021 in terms of session attendance, mode of sessions, all of those details. And I can do that in every single section. Our coaching framework has a number of coaching activities that we undertake with consumers, and this can actually show us mapped out against our outcomes chain, what outcomes we're actually focusing on the work that we're doing with consumers. Just want to show you another one. These are our consumer profiles. So these consumer profiles are really demonstrates the adversity that our consumers are actually facing. So, for example, if I highlighted on this one, we can use this to demonstrate the level of complexity and adversity that we're working with when we work with our consumers. So as you can see by this, mental health in adults, so current and historic mental health, as well as current and historic family violence, are two of the major complexities that our families actually experience, as well as current and historic child mental health. So using this data, we know where we can actually direct and develop our training and development for our staff and support for our staff. just want to show you a couple of the scattergrams. So these are scattergrams of the parenting of the PEEM, and it actually shows us that on average there's 15.48% of change favourable in the pre and post PEEM scores. And just an improvements report. There is so much data in here that, you know, sort of 5 to 10 minutes doesn't really give me a great opportunity to share it with you. But this is a great report that also demonstrates to us how what our improvements are. So whether our parenting wellbeing index for adults has actually improved, regressed, or whether there has been no change at all, and also with the PEEM too. So it says that 74.24% of our consumers have actually experienced improvement in the PEEM. There has been 12 consumers who have experienced regression and 5 where there has been no change at all. So Warren, I'm going to stop sharing. If you would like to just bring up I think it's number 21 slide. Yep, number 21.
So the one you're after, Marija?
No, the black and white one with the consumer identification. Okay, terrific. So what this is just demonstrating the left hand and the right hand selection menus. What we're able to do, as you can see, is actually probably can't see it the best, it's a little bit vague, but actually compare, make a comparison of, say, January, February, March, April and May in 2021, and then the same months in 2022. And if I pressed menu again on that screen, it would actually provide me with the data and the comparable table. So we can actually see how we progress over a certain period of time. Warren, that's sort of it in terms of the dashboard. So I'll hand over to you, and you'll hand over back to me for the challenges. I think you're on mute, Warren.
Man, what a rookie error. And we do need to wrap. So look, maybe we could just before we go to the challenges, is just to say that these data dashboards are now being used by a practice improvement team. And that team is drawn from the family services area. It involves the team leaders of the family service area, and they're now using that data to drive plan, do, study, act cycles. And they are just working iteratively on the things that their data is showing them where there is potential for development or potential for improvement.
Okay, so I'm not on mute, thank goodness. For the challenges, I think I could have done a list as long as my arm here, but just in summary, we know that change is hard. I mean, you know, how many of us have started a diet and haven't got through with it? And change is hard in every aspect. So where we were looking at not only implementing a new coaching approach, but also a continuous practice improvement was really challenging for our staff. So as much as we had to do implementation, we also needed to de-implement and actually stop some practices from happening. Some of the challenges, but some of those really good challenges were things where, you know, where we were saying to practitioners, you are not responsible for the outcome of whatever this consumer decides. We as practitioners are responsible for the process, not the outcome. Things like working with mental health is actually our role. We can't say, well, we're going to wait until this person gets over their mental health issues, because we all have mental health issues and we're still parents and need to live and work in that way. And I know Warren talked about the learning circles, professional development, individual coaching, and implementation includes all of that. And I think one of the other real challenges is in terms of practice improvement has now become an everyday practice. So really trying to make that a part of people's everyday practice. Some of the other challenges are things like staff turnover, which we can't help, and just making sure that our staff are continuously on top of their surveys. And finally, change takes a long time. So over to you, Lynette, to wrap up. And there is a question, can you share investment costs in developing your own database and Power BI integration?
Well, I don't have the answer for that. That's more a Warren question. I guess because prior somebody asked that question, is the database that Warren's team have developed, and we've worked really closely with them in relation to that. But I just want to say, because I don't want to take up too much time, it's an exciting journey. We are making progress. The data is so critical to this process, because without it, it's just a lot of discussion. Really, our focus has been about practice reform. We know if we can reform our practice, that the outcomes for our consumers will be the best that it can, but that requires us to invest in our employees, which we wanted to do anyway. So this process has just been fantastic, and we're looking at rolling it into a number of our other areas. We're in the process of doing that. We've developed some resources, again in partnership with the Parent Research Centre, which will be landing very shortly. So for us, this is an exciting journey, and we're just really pleased to be able to share it with you. So thanks for your time.
Terrific. And I think we've got 2 minutes, and there's a question of how do we choose our pre and post measure tools. So Warren worked with us. We actually ran a pilot for a whole year, did a whole lot of testing. We looked at validated tools. So that's where the PEAM came in and fit right across our outcomes measures, right across our outcomes. So the PEAM and the Parenting Wellbeing Index. So really mapped out those measures against our theory of change. Warren, did you want to add anything?
No, that's great. And in terms of investment, I don't know whether I'd say we've got good information on that, because the piece of work that we did together was very iterative. Like we had to do a lot of kind of stopping and starting. We learnt a lot during the process. So it was probably I think perhaps a little bit more than what it would cost somebody starting from scratch. But I just want to make this point. Off-the-shelf data systems can be quite expensive. And I think using a tool like Power BI can give an organisation the opportunity to, at minimum, prototype a data collection system. So prior to investing a lot of money in a data system that then doesn't deliver what you need, you have this opportunity to sort of at least pilot or prototype using a powerful tool like Power BI. I'm not sure. I think Windermere is pretty. I can't see them moving on from. I don't know what you think, Lynette, but it has proved to be quite powerful. The other thing about it is you can now find, if you don't have people on staff who have got building skills in Power BI, there's a growing number of consultants that can be engaged to help you do this sort of coding. It's a bit like a Excel spreadsheet. It's just slightly more complicated in terms of formulas. So, I think it's within reach for lots of organisations to use a tool like Power BI, especially when the bigger, systems are out of reach financially speaking.
Yeah. And Warren, there's just one more question there I wouldn't mind quickly responding to. It's about the practitioners and engaging the practitioners. I think I might have beaten you by a whisker there, Marija. It's absolutely critical. We started off with champions, with our team leaders around the table, and it grew from there. And basically what we needed to really embed in this process was that this data was not going to be used against our staff. It wasn't about using it in that way. It was using it in a development process and a learning system approach. And we just hammered that right from the go. And there were a number of staff who, and we've still got a few, let's not be too holy about this, we've still got a few who try to duck and weave around the data because they just don't want to have that level of transparency. But as we were using it in our learning circles, in developing, coming together, it just embeds it even more. They've had to be involved, because otherwise, if they're not involved, the message you're sending is what you've been doing up till now is wrong. What we were saying is what we want to do is take what we're doing now and do it better. And that was the excitement of the journey, was that we wanted to do it better so we could do more with our consumers. And that made sense. And so using the data in that way is the way that we took everybody on this journey. And I think you'll probably be able to see, and I've been spruiking it and talking about it passionately. So in some respects, I knew it wasn't going to go away. So that was another part of the equation. So hopefully I've answered that question.
Thank you so much, Lynette, Warren and Marija. I mean, we can see writ large here the role of leadership, organisational systems, staff, training, platforms, policies, and an improvement agenda rather than a perfection agenda, which I just think is such a powerful message. I'm going to take the prerogative of the host and just ask one quick more question. Often we hear from sector organisations that they're already overburdened with output reporting and performance accountability mechanisms for lots of funders. I'm just wondering, this has been a holistic system you've put in place that has drawn upon a range of outcome measurement tools consistently across the board. How have you balanced that up with requirements from your external funders and stakeholders? Has that been able to be negotiated more powerfully?
Marija, I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, look, I don't think it has really complemented what is already being done. It isn't an additional task or an additional burden. It is just a part of the work that they do. So if you could imagine when so all of the data that comes in goes through Prize, which is, if you can imagine, is like a survey monkey. So the data goes in online and automatically is uploaded. So there is very little that staff need to do on top of what they're already doing. So that's the best way I can really describe it.
And all our staff have mobile equipment, so they're all fully mobile, so they can do it real time. It's not about, you know, having to write it down, come back. They can do it right there and then.
And we moved from Excel to online, and that they were very happy days, I can tell you. So nobody really complains about it now. Sorry, Warren.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, we were very careful, weren't we, to ensure that it didn't overlap with what needed to be entered into the client management system, as opposed to this practice-focused information system. They're quite different purposes. And so that's why I think we're able to sort of avoid a kind of double entry type scenario going on.
That's really powerful. Thank you so much. Now, we do have a couple of other questions there, but we'll ensure that they're put to our presenters, or you can enlarge upon them. We do write up our events and provide a review of it and a blog, and share PowerPoint and any resources that are mentioned. So that will be also something that we'll do. And I'm sure our presenters today will be happy for you to reach out to them separately. If you're
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Okay, now we're going to introduce, that was so fascinating, thank you very much, Jessica Graham-Franklin. Jessica, if you could share your screen, that would be wonderful, just while I introduce you. Jessica is this, are we all good? Yeah. Jessica is the Associate Director, Programs, Employment at Social Ventures Australia, where for the past 3 years she has led SVA's Review for Outcomes work. Jessica has 10 years experience in the not-for-profit sector in program design, delivery and management, and monitoring, evaluation and learning. Jessica brings deep operational experience working for both small and large not-for-profits, delivering projects focused on outcomes management and continuous improvement. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Mandy, and thank you so much for having me here today. I will just flag that my colleague Simon is in the audience. So if you do have questions as I go through my presentation over the next 25 to 30 minutes, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. He will do his very best to answer them, and then we'll have 10 minutes or so at the end for questions. And I encourage you guys to take yourselves off mute and ask them openly. As Mandy said, My name is Jess and I'm an Associate Director at Social Ventures Australia. Today I'm here to talk to you about our Review for Outcomes project. Review is a set of shared outcomes measures and a data collection and analysis platform that we have developed specifically for the youth employment sector. And I will flag that there's a lot of overlap with what you've heard from the previous speakers, which I think is a really positive sign. And hopefully you can draw some really interesting learnings from across both of us today. A little bit about SVA. We are a not-for-profit organisation that has been around for about 20 years, but we're a little bit different than other not-for-profits in that we are not a service delivery organisation. We do research and use evidence to work with partner organisations and to support innovation and different ways of working. And really it's about empowering other social purpose organisations to do what they do even better. Employment is a core part of our business and the part of the programs team that I sit within. And we have a long history at SVA of working with social purpose organisations across Australia that support people into employment, with a specific focus on young people, especially young people who are facing multiple and often complex barriers to work. And one of the ways that we do this is via our Review project. Youth unemployment continues to be a significant issue. The COVID-19 pandemic has only compounded that with decades of youth unemployment and underemployment. And even though there are hundreds of organisations across the country delivering really innovative youth employment programs that are achieving good outcomes for young people, it can be hard to know what good looks like. For these organisations and others, it's really important that they're able to demonstrate the value that their programs are having by using data to reinforce their program models and drive decision making. And there's little consistency across organisations regarding the systems and methods used to collect and analyse data. I'm sure you know, and as Windermere mentioned, measuring impacts can be a challenge. And so for the last 4 years, Social Ventures Australia has partnered with philanthropy and with the youth employment sector to research, design, develop and launch the Review platform, and we're still very much evolving. The Review platform is a free online outcomes measurement tool. As I said, it's been specifically designed for organisations and practitioners delivering employment programs for young people aged 15 to 24. This includes jobs-focused social enterprises and education, training and employment services working with young people where employment is the goal. Over the next little while, I'll take you through the steps that we have taken to design a shared approach to measuring outcomes across the youth employment sector, to develop a set of tools to collect and analyse data, and I'll give you a bit of a live demonstration of the Review platform. And I'll also share some of our learnings from the project along the way. I think, as Warren has said in his previous presentation, outcomes measurement is about continuous improvement. And whether you're doing this at the program level, the organisational level, or the systems level, the process is very much the same. Review has been going for 4 years. We've taken a staged approach to the project over that time. Year one, the focus was very much on the design of a framework and a set of indicators relevant across the youth employment sector. Years 2 and 3 focused on measurement, specifically developing tools for measurement. And we're now in year 4, where the focus is very much on implementation, learning, and continuous improvement. The first step of measuring the effectiveness of any program is to be clear about the objectives of your work and the outcomes that you want to measure. For us, that meant identifying the objectives and outcomes that are common to youth employment providers. And we did this in 2 ways. The first was by talking and engaging with a variety of people doing this work. We convened a design working group to ensure project activities were grounded in evidence and were fit for purpose. They helped to oversee our activities and share their feedback and insights. This was a group comprised of 6 organisations, including Origin, Foundation of Excellence in Youth Mental Health, Brotherhood of St Lawrence, Jesuit Social Services, Vic Health, University of Melbourne, and Jobs Australia. So they brought diverse experience from the youth space, the employment space, and also, of course, from research. We also conducted interviews with over 22 youth employment program providers across the country to really understand their program models, the changes that they hoped to see in young people, and the information they felt was important for them to collect for different audiences, both internal, so program staff and the leadership teams and the boards, as well as external, so their funders and other partners. These were organisations on the ground delivering a wide array of different youth employment programs, and we made sure that we spoke to people of all levels within those organisations. So we spoke to case managers on the ground, we spoke to program managers, CEOs, and people within those organisations responsible for outcomes measurement. We also ran a design workshop, which again included the organisations that we had interviewed and members of our design working group. And the purpose of that was really to start to shape some common language around what success looks like, to define successful outcomes, to understand how data will be used, and to think about how data will be captured. We also looked at research of what worked in youth employment. So we looked at international best practice and reviewed Australian literature, published program evaluations, and academic research. From that, we identified a best practice approach, a set of 10 features of a youth employment program that are likely to produce better outcomes for young people. We also identified a set of common measures. These are measures that are relevant to a group of youth employment providers that are based on research of what works in youth employment, as well as existing survey tools, such as the Job Seeker Classification Instrument and the HILDA survey. The indicators that we identified can be grouped into 3 categories. The first is demographic information, because first and foremost, it's important to know who you are working for. The second group of indicators relate to program effectiveness. We know that effects vary widely between programs of the same type, and there's certainly no one-size-fits-all approach. And so how programs are delivered is critical. And for these indicators, we used the 10 features that had been identified as the basis for the measures of an effective program. And then last but certainly not least, the third group of indicators measure what a program is achieving. This is our set of shared outcomes that are evidence-based and that were developed alongside providers for being most relevant to understanding the impact of youth employment programs. As Warren mentioned earlier, some of this work is really about prioritizing what is most important for organizations or programs to be collecting. These are outcomes that go beyond outputs, so how many programs are delivered, how many people are supported, and start to look at things that are meaningful for young people, such as a young person's satisfaction with the job they are in, the hours of work that they have, their job stability, whether or not the job uses their skills. But they also measure a young person's perceived employability, looking at things such as career direction, attitude to work, and job networks. It was during this phase that we identified, as my colleagues previously have said, and I'm sure you know, data collection can be a challenge, particularly because many of the providers we spoke to lacked access to free, easy to use data collection tools. And even if they had the tools, data collection was often resource and time intensive and often a very manual process. So using the indicators we had identified, we developed a set of 3 participant surveys and a prototype data collection tool that we hoped would allow providers to capture feedback from participants quickly and easily, as well as a dashboard that would allow them to visualize and analyze the data. And we did that using Google Forms and Google Sheets. But we needed to test them. So we worked with a group of 8 youth employment providers, and these were a mix of small and medium organisations delivering a range of different types of programs to implement the tools with over 40 young people with diverse experiences, and that was really important as well. And the purpose of this testing was threefold. Firstly, do the survey questions make sense from a young person's point of view? Secondly, is the data being produced valuable for providers and the audience for whom they would like to collect data? So thinking about their funders. And are the tools easy to use and implement on both sides? So for participants of the programs and the providers themselves. We learned a lot through this process. And some of the key things to just note, I guess, is that it's really important to engage with multiple users. Lynette has said this, you know, it's about involving practitioners in this process, all people at different points within the organisation, as well as diverse people that are participating in programs with different experiences. For us, it was really helpful to have the design working group as well, because it strengthened the value and the direction of the project, and it was really good to have a sounding board outside of our organisation. I think one of the key things about making sure you bring practitioners on the journey with you is that it gives them a sense of ownership, and it also creates buy-in for the measures and the tools that you're implementing, and that's really important for consistent use. The other thing was start by creating a common language and shared goals, and I know Lynette talked a little bit about this right at the beginning. All of the organisations that we worked with, and even within organisations, different staff members bring different skills, experience and knowledge of outcomes measurement and continuous improvement. So it was really important that we created a shared understanding of what success looked like and a common language around some of those things, so that we could really start to define what was important across providers. And the other thing is that I've sort of talked about this in a linear way, but designing is not a linear process. As I talked about, you know, outcomes measurement is a cycle of continuous improvement. This is an iterative process, whether you're designing for the first time or you're coming back to the measures that you've designed previously to see if they still ring true. That's all really, really important. And it's an ongoing process. Practically, in terms of the measurement tools, we really needed to make sure that they were easy to extend to program participants. We found that electronic and online works with most, but it won't necessarily work with all cohorts. The surveys needed to be really quick to complete, and they needed to be integrated into program delivery easily, because that really lends itself to greater response rates and greater participation of the participants. So following the testing of the prototype tools, we updated the 3 surveys we had developed. We changed some of the questions to make them easier to understand. We removed questions to shorten the length of the surveys, and we removed some questions that were not relevant across all providers. And it was also at this stage that we decided to develop a custom-built data collection platform. And that was very much based on the feedback that we had collected from the organisations that we were working with. It took us 7 months to develop the custom-built platform, including scoping, design and development, user input, and rigorous quality control and testing. And that's when, just over 18 months ago, the SVA launched the review platform. It's a free online outcomes measurement tool for organisations delivering employment programs to young people. So what is it though? It's a free online digital survey tool. Again, think of a survey monkey. It comprises 3 ready-to-use participant surveys that give providers the opportunity to hear directly from their participants at different points in time. All of the data that is collected via these surveys and stored on the platform is securely hosted here in Australia, and it's owned exclusively by the organisation using the tool. So it's not owned by us at SVA, it's owned by the organisations using the tools. And all of the survey responses are de-identified to protect the privacy and confidentiality of the participants. But it's more than a survey tool, it's also a data analysis tool. So the review platform automatically collates the feedback collected by the surveys and presents it in dynamic charts and tables, which simplifies analysis and allows providers to view results at both the program and the organisational level. Data can be filtered by specific date ranges and can be easily exported so that providers can create their own bespoke charts and also integrate it with other sources. I've said it once and I'll say it again, outcomes measurement practice is a cycle of continuous improvement. And so ultimately the review platform is a tool that enables providers to learn from the feedback young people are providing and to use data to drive decision-making and continuous improvement, because programs that are highly responsive to the needs of their participants work best. How does the platform work? The diagram here provides a quick overview. The items in blue are the components that are used by program staff, and the items in purple indicate the components that are completed by a young person. The first step for anyone using the platform is to set up a program, and this includes adding program information such as program name and dates and any notes about the program. This is where users import or add participant information, including name, email, and contact phone number, as these enable the surveys to be distributed via email and via SMS. This is also where users schedule the surveys so that they can be sent to participants at specific points in time that are relevant for a program. Survey 1 is a baseline, so that is implemented at the beginning of a program. Survey 2 is usually implemented towards the end of a program, and Survey 3 as a follow-up once participants have left the program. And these different points in time allow providers to track the change that occurs for participants over time. Once the program has been set up, the next step is for the surveys to be sent out. As I said, survey distribution is automated from within the platform because we really wanted to save providers time. They can be sent, as I said, via email and SMS, but they can also be accessed online via the platform. So if a young person doesn't have access to a mobile phone or a computer, then if there's an iPad or a computer within the program that they can jump on and access their survey link that way. The platform also enables providers to track surveys by giving instant visibility over who has completed them and who hasn't, and enables them to follow up with anyone that they need to. And then, of course, as feedback starts being collected for each survey, the platform automatically collates it into charts and tables for analysis and response. Providers can engage with the results throughout the data collection process, so not just at the end of a program or after survey 3. And feedback can and should very much be reviewed throughout the whole period, as it provides an opportunity to respond to what the data is telling them in a timely manner. What I'm going to do now is just exit out of my slides and I'll jump onto the platform itself. Let me just stop sharing and I will bring that up for you. Just to give you a really quick look. Can everybody see that? Yeah, I'm getting a nod, so that's a good sign. As I said, the first step for anyone using the platform is to set up a program. Once that's done, you're taken to this screen, and this is the program overview screen. You can see up the top, it's the information that I mentioned before that you would input during setting up a program. So you've got the start date, end date, participants, and some program notes. Underneath, you've got a really quick access view of who has responded to surveys and who hasn't. And you can also edit your program from this page. For each survey, there's a tab up the top, and that allows you to start to track and manage your surveys in more detail. As I said, you can send them via email or via SMS. There's also a link within the platform to access individual surveys. And again, you can track who has completed and who hasn't, and manually resend the link if there's anyone that you need to follow up with. You also have a really quick access view of how many people have completed those. And then, of course, probably most interestingly, you've got your results. The results here are grouped in those 3 categories that I mentioned before. So you've got the participant information, so that's the who you're working with. This is demographic information that's mostly collected in survey 1. things like age, gender, disability, cultural background, but also a couple of things that are more specific to employment, like length of unemployment and work barriers. You've also got the program features. So this is how the program is performing based on that best practice approach that we identified and those 10 features of an effective youth employment program. For each feature, there's a donut chart, and we use the visual representation of green, orange, and red to quickly show where there's been a positive improvement, perhaps where there's been a neutral change, and where there's been perhaps a negative change, or as we like to think of it, room for improvement. So you can see here the contrast between the strengths and aspirations chart on the left-hand side. You can see, based on the feedback that young people have provided, they feel strongly that, or they agree that the program has recognised their strengths and aspirations, versus on the right-hand side, our barriers to employment chart, it's showing more red, which indicates, for the most part, young people disagree that the program has identified and responded to the range of issues that they may be experiencing. So as a provider, that gives you really good insight into where you may be able to improve your program, and provides impetus to have further conversations with your participants and with your staff to work out, what you could maybe do differently to improve what you're already doing. And then, of course, we've got the measures for program outcomes. These look at employment outcomes, education outcomes, and also start to look at some of those employability skills that we talked about. And these are our change over time charts that show where there's been an improvement in employability skills for this group of participants. So we can see there's been an 83% positive change in confidence to find work, but unfortunately there's been a 33% negative change in capacity to access the labour market. And again, this is really helpful, not just for understanding the impact that the program is having, but to understand where there might be opportunities to do things differently. The review platform also provides an aggregated picture of the outcomes and measures across all programs, and that can be seen here on the dashboard. This is a really quick access view of what's happening holistically. So you've got some of that demographic data up the top. You've also got some of the key outcomes data. So how many employed, how many studying, how many employed and studying. We've then got some of those charts that go into employment outcomes in more detail, those employability skills down the right-hand side, and the program features. So across all of the programs, you can get a sense of where you're performing really, really well and where there might be opportunities to do things differently. Now, I've only got 5 minutes, so I'm going to stop that live demonstration, but I will say that I'm really, really happy to provide a more in-depth demonstration for anyone who's interested. Don't hesitate to get in touch with me at any time. I'm just going to finish off my slides quickly. I'll just share my screen again here. Since launching 18 months ago, the review platform has been used by over 120 youth employment programs, and it has been implemented with over 1,200 young people across the country. We do work with diverse organisations, social enterprises, small, medium and large not-for-profits, and employment and training providers. And we work closely with them to support the implementation of the tools and the use of the data within their own programs. They've reported significant time and financial savings, with one user stating savings are likely in the order of $10,000. We've had others report successes in funding applications and accreditations, in part due to the meaningful and credible data that they've been able to collect via the review platform. And of course, others that report data-driven improvements to program content and delivery so that they are appropriately meeting the evolving needs of their participants. And of course, more efficient evaluation methods and improved capacity to gather and analyse data. For the organisations already using the tools, as I said, we provide ongoing support to them so that they can use the data that they're collecting to learn and continuously improve. We had one social enterprise that made a new addition to their service delivery based on participant feedback through the review platform. They identified that there was room for improvement in their post-program support. So they decided to hire a youth transitions employee who would be responsible for servicing clients post-program to further guide them on their proposed employment action plan. One of the key learnings, I think, for our users has really been around the importance of ensuring that the review surveys are integrated into organisational practices, including their way of working with participants and any existing data collection methods. It's really important, again, that implementation includes operational staff and practitioners so that they can ask questions and understand what the program is trying to achieve by using the platform, as this really helps to drive consistent implementation. I think one of the biggest challenges that providers face is getting young people to complete the surveys. And I will say that's probably always going to be a bit of a challenge when working really in any program, but with young people in particular. But our providers are addressing this in really creative ways that make sense for them and for their program participants. We've seen the greatest success when surveys are integrated into the program. So for example, when a young person starts the program, they might sit down with a case manager or a youth engagement officer and actually do the survey with them. Our providers have also found that it's really important that they provide some upfront framing and context about the surveys. So young people don't just get sent the link, but they're told ahead of time what the link is, when it's coming and why it's so important. And we've developed a participant information sheet that providers can tailor and give to participants, which explains about consent and privacy and really just reassures them that any answers that they provide won't impact the service that they receive. And then we've also got some providers who have implemented incentives for participants that complete all 3 surveys. So for example, if a young person completes all 3 surveys, they might go into the draw to win a voucher. For SBA and for the sector, we're always looking for ways to strengthen the review tools to better meet the needs of the youth employment sector. So we really welcome any feedback you might have after today. 2 weeks ago, we did launch the review platform's newest feature, which allows users to add their own questions to the existing 3 review surveys. And we're super excited by this new feature because it's something that providers have been telling us they want for some time. Being able to customize surveys and giving providers that flexibility will make it a more valuable tool for them and will help to give them a more complete and relevant picture of the impact they're having. Since launching, we've continued to grow the platform user base, and we want to continue to develop this network by working with new partners across the country. We've also been able to use the review tools in policy submissions, particularly the 10 features that reinforce what an effective youth employment program looks like. And then as platform use increases and data grows over time, there is the potential that SBA may be able to use the collective data to start to inform some sector policy and responses. I think I've pretty much hit my time limit. So I'm going to leave it there and invite any questions from our audience.
Thank you so much for that, Jess. That was fascinating. Once again, the process, the defining success through collaborative practice, the developing outcome measurement tools, the platform to manage the data, the continuous learning and iterative improvement just jumps out at you. So such different contexts, but such a common range of tools and techniques. So I think that's just really exciting. That's really exciting. It makes me feel it's more manageable. It's not so varied. We've had some really great questions. Anyone is welcome to unmute themselves and speak to their own question, or I'll just read them out. But jump in if you then want to respond back. We've had Desiree Nangle. Do you think having surveys tied to individual youth instead of being anonymous has impacted response rates?
So you can't actually link our survey responses to individual participants. All of the data is de-identified. So providers have access to the raw data that sits behind the charts and tables on the platform and dashboard, but they still can't see who those responses are linked to.
Thanks for that. I guess I was just wondering, we found in some of our services that if you ask for a name or identifying information, that it deters some users from taking a survey at all. So I was just curious if you thought that had an impact.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question. I think we've actually found the opposite, and I can only speak from the feedback that we get from our providers, but certainly one of the users of the platform has reported that it's actually helped to strengthen the relationships that they have with their participants and build trust. And they use it as a mechanism for having some of those other conversations that need to be had, whether it's at the beginning of the program or kind of as they move through the program. But because they are de-identified, you know, when framing it up front, we encourage our providers to say, look, we can't see your individual responses, and just to try and assure them that way.
Perhaps it might be valuable just to outline the parameters around who can actually come to you to discuss using the program.
Yeah.
What's involved? Is there a fee? You know,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mandy. So look, anybody that is delivering a program or project for young people aged 15 to 24, where employment is a goal, is welcome to come and speak with us about the application of the review platform. We offer the platform to the sector for free, and we are able to do that because of very generous philanthropic support, and that won't change. And we do that because we know how inaccessible some of these tools and resources are for providers and how costly outcomes measurement can be. So we want to continue to be able to offer the platform for free. If you are interested in signing up to the platform, I encourage you to reach out to me. We've also got our review@socialventures.com email address, which is monitored by me. Reach out, I can set up a live demo with you, or we can just have a conversation about whether it's relevant for your program and what implementation could look like. We provide training on the platform. We also provide resources. So we've got training videos and user guides, and we provide ongoing support as well as part of our service offering. And again, that's all free for you as providers.
In that vein, I was really interested in the uptake from organisations and your reflections on when is it a good fit and what might be challenges and or the common challenges or supports that you've observed might help organisations use this approach. What are your learnings out of doing this with organisations?
Good question. Look, I think there needs to be an appetite for this kind of work. So again, I think this was one of your very first points, Mandy, is there really needs to be that appetite for learning and for data-driven learning and continuous improvement. And it needs to have buy-in from not just the leadership, but whoever is being tasked with sort of setting it up on their program's behalf and bringing their team along on the journey. We can only do so much of that as an external organisation to influence practice. And so there really needs to be that support around the platform to encourage that practice change, because it really is, it's almost a change management, piece of work. It's changing practice within an organisation and ways of thinking and attitudes of work, and that requires kind of buy-in at all different levels. So I think that's probably been one of the successes, is where that works really well, where they have those ingredients, but also one of the challenges where we might have an organisation who's really keen to use the tool. They might have a practitioner or, versely a CEO who loves the platform, but it doesn't necessarily have that buy-in at the different levels, and that then kind of stalls any kind of consistent implementation. So I think that's probably one of the biggest learnings that we've had supporting providers.
I can see Lynette smiling there. of course, all of us who might not be in the youth unemployment area, I was thinking this as well. Is there any interest in adapting or following this developmental process for other priority areas within the not-for-profit sector?
So not at the moment. This tool has been specifically designed based on research and evidence of youth employment. So all of the measures and indicators and the survey questions within the platform are specifically tailored to that sector and that cohort or group of program participants. The infrastructure, however, does exist. And, you know, we have had interest from other sectors in doing something similar for them. We work closely with the developers who built this platform with us, and I know they've previously said that there may be an opportunity to white label it. That's not an opportunity we've pursued thus far, but it's certainly something that we're keeping an open mind about. Yeah, hope that answers the question.
One of the things we've found in some of their organisations is they have good success when, in actual fact, the data collection is used as part of a therapeutic process with the client to show to the client the improvements that are made. Are you finding in the way this is being used in organisations that it's being used and reported back to the client in a therapeutic, not just measurement way?
It's an interesting question. I don't know, in all honesty, not that we're aware of it. I would say that the data is primarily being used by staff and teams to inform their practice, and then externally to, you know, for reporting, for funding applications, for acquittals, for those sorts of things as well. So it's sort of adding credibility, I suppose, to organisations when speaking with external partners, as well as driving their own practice change within their teams.
Is there any reason that it couldn't be used for that purpose?
Absolutely not, other than you can't see the individual responses. So from a therapeutic sense, if you're wanting to use it to support individual participants, you don't necessarily get the detail of the individual responses. We do have in Survey 1 that demographic information, which talks a lot about work barriers. And I think that is really important for providers at the beginning of a program to understand the specific needs that that group in particular might be coming with. And of course, that would change depending on the group. And they're then able to sort of tailor their content or their delivery based on those needs. But that's looking at it from a group's point of view rather than an individual therapeutic point of view.
Yeah. I notice here Lawson Smith has commented on being an SE Review user and can vouch for the accessibility for young people. I don't know if Lawson is still with us and might want to say a few comments reflecting on that experience, or is that putting someone on the spot too much? Let's see.
He won't mind.
I don't mind. I don't know if you can hear me. Can I just get a check, mic check?
Yes, we can certainly hear you, Lawson.
Fantastic.
Sorry to do that, but I just thought, oh my God, it's just too good an opportunity.
Sure. No, of course. Yeah, so I worked quite closely with Jess and others in designing something that works for us as a social enterprise here in Perth that employs young people out of our engagement program and into gardening jobs. So yeah, the process of doing a first survey when they first come to us, and then one when they leave, and then one 6 months afterwards, is a slow process in the sense that you're not capturing data overnight. It's a bit of a grind to build a database, but we're at a point now after about a year of using the platform where we're starting to see the momentum that it's building come through in the dashboard that she showed us earlier, and start to paint a picture of what areas our program needs to improve in and what we're providing in a really good way from the young people's point of view.
Really fascinating. We've got just a few minutes left, so I was going to ask a question both to Jess and Lynette, Warren and Marija, a common question about data reporting burden. The burden of data collection on consumers and stuff is always an issue, always. And this is one of the biggest reasons that people want to trim back what they ask and are constantly sort of bridling against the burden of this. What are some of the ways your systems and you've approached minimising that burden to balance the need for data, the integrity of the outcomes, but the appropriateness to sort of client groups that we're collecting information from? Perhaps, I mean, Lynette, maybe, did you want to start?
Yeah,
or
I was going to say that we're selective about the data that we collect. So we're not trying to capture data on every aspect. So we're very selective about that. But the important part, which I think the burden comes from, is if we don't feed it back and show the results and share the data with people. And if it's just one way, then it has absolutely no benefit. It's really critical that the data comes back in some way that is useful, and you can use it to either inspire, to find the changes you need to make, look at the data as the tool to help make things better, as it just against compliance data. We are not gathering data for compliance. We're gathering data to improve the outcomes for our consumers and for our employees. And that is the message, which is very different. And, you know, as to other departmental data, I'll say nothing on that. I'll just leave that with everybody else and the common views on that. So, but that's why we gather data.
Jess, what would you say to that?
I mean, it's exactly what Lynette has said. You know, I think I sound like a broken record, but it really is about continuous improvement. We, you know, in our testing and prototyping, we did everything to ensure that what we were doing wasn't a burden for young people or for practitioners. We wanted to make it as quick and easy as possible. So we reduced the length of the surveys. We decided to build the custom platform that provided those useful charts and tables so that the data can actually be used without having to be manually manipulated. And we had the luxury of philanthropic support to be able to do that. I recognize that not everybody does. So I would say, you know, think about how you collect your data. Don't necessarily think that surveys and dashboards are the only way to do that. There are lots of different ways to collect feedback. Think about what's going to work best for you, your staff, and the people that you support. And just start somewhere. You don't have to get it perfect the first time. It is an iterative process, and you'll learn as you go what works and what doesn't.
So maybe doing some small amount of data collection really well is better to create sufficient or good enough evidence to inform decisions, is better than going for the get-go, because I do think people think, oh, that'd be, it moves away from what we must know to what we'd like to know.
And it goes back to what Warren was saying, you know, it's that messaging of outcomes measurement being a product, and it's not a product, it's a process. So just start somewhere and start small, and you can build from that. And as you say, smaller, you know, done well, rather than feeling really overwhelmed by the big task of outcomes measurement.
So, so perhaps the message here, hopefully we've inspired some people to want to explore this more fully, thinking about where you can simplify and define better and engage and work together, because it's a process, which means a collaborative process usually as well. This has been an amazing session. Just the depth of insight and honesty in terms of your journeys and what worked and what didn't and where you've got to right now. I'm sure you'd be all really happy for any of our audience to reach out. We will be, of course, sharing this recording, trying to capture some of the richness and insights and learnings that you've been able to provide us today. And I also want to ask everyone to look out for our Embedding Evidence Spotlight page on the Open Portal. So if you're not already on our mailing list, please feel free to flick us your details or go online to effectively subscribe. But it basically just commits you to getting one newsletter a month. That's it. And then you'll hear about all our other activities, including this new session, which I might try and get some people to co-author with us. Wouldn't that be so cool? Because there is so much wisdom in our room right now on this issue. Thank you once again. We'll be sitting tight here. If you do want to hang back and have a quick word to our presenters, I'm sure they've got another 10 minutes, or you could just say hello to the team at Open. Thank you very much.